and we are the manufacturer of a product called databot, which is an exciting new STEM product that has been around for a little over a year now and has some awesome applications for CTE education. And we'll be looking at some of that today. So I've been doing robotics and engineering and teaching kids coding and a lot of hands-on type STEM activities for over 30 years. And I've had the great pleasure of doing that, frankly, all over the world and as well as virtually. So I've got lots of stories to share. And this product that I'm going to be showing you is really remarkable. It's the product of 30 years of trial and error and trying to find a product that really would fit into a lot of different environments and make life a lot easier for educators and kids. So let's take a look at databot. The webinar today, what we're going to cover is, first of all, just the product itself. It's a small wireless all-in-one sensor device that fits in the palm of your hand. We're also going to look at phyphox, which is the software we use for visualizing and recording data. One of the interesting things about databot is it's an open architecture product, so it actually talks to a lot of different software, which we'll also talk about. But phyphox we've found to be just the simplest to use. We've integrated with Google Science Journal, we've used Excel, we've used a number of other products. And phyphox, it turns out, is just really easy. It's basically one touch and you're up and running. Kids are pre-configured with their experiment and it saves you a lot of time in the classroom. So we'll be looking at phyphox, and actually, hopefully you all have your smartphones or tablets with you. You can actually install it and play with it today. We're going to go through a few examples of design challenges that you can do with databot and some other materials. And we're actually compiling a library of different design challenges because since databot can address so many different topics across all the core sciences, coding, STEM, engineering, there's a lot of neat things you can do with it. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes on data literacy, which is something I've been researching and promoting pretty heavily lately because it's one of the things that I think we need to be embedding in all of the classes that we do for kids. There's so much numerical data out there that is available now, and a lot of times it's misinterpreted or spun incorrectly, and we need to make sure kids are literate so that they can understand and interpret the data and the numbers they're seeing. After that, we'll wrap up with an opportunity for questions. And then, as Christy said, this is being recorded. This presentation is going to be something that she can email out to everybody who participates. So let's get started. Let's meet databot. So this is a picture of databot. It's 1.67 inches or 42.5 millimeters on a side. It's a cube. And it is basically an all-in-one device. So it's crystal clear polycarbonate. It's tough as nails. It's been dropped. It's been stuck inside Nerf footballs. It's been kicked. It's been sent up on a drone. It's been sent up in kites, weather balloons. It is very tough. So that was one of the criteria for the product, was to make sure that it was, tough as nails, because kids, of course, are going to drop it, and it's going to be used in some really interesting environments when you see some of the activities that kids do. So it combines 10 different internal sensors. So the list of sensors is available, or is listed right there on this slide. It comes with an external temperature probe, which I'll show you a picture of here in just a second. It's got humidity, it's got UVA and UVB wavelengths, calculates a UV index, takes ambient light. There's an air quality sensor that has carbon dioxide and volatile organic compounds. So you can do all kinds of fun air quality and CO2 investigations. Has air pressure, so it takes barometric pressure and it calculates altitude from that, so you can actually use it as an altimeter. And then it's got an IMU in it for physics, so it's got an accelerometer, gyro, magnetometer. And then finally there's a microphone in it, so you can actually take recordings and do sound levels. One of the interesting things also, it's been designed for physical computing. So it's got some brilliant white LEDs built into the base that you can see there. And it also has a full spectrum sound or tone generator. So you can actually create all kinds of fascinating experiments with kids that where you can actually program it, for example, to have personality. You could throw it in the air, and when it senses its motion, it'll squeal. Or you might breathe on it and it could chortle like a Wookiee. Lots of fun physical computing type activities that you can do with this that allow you to get into robotics coding without having to chase 500 robotics parts. So it's kind of a nice it's a nice option if you really want to focus on physical computing and not have to chase all of the parts at one particular point. As I said, I've been teaching robotics for 30 years, so I love the build aspect, but I also know there are times when you'd like to just focus on the coding. So this is a great alternative to that. So let's move on to the next slide. This is actually, you know, we sell these in kits that come in a soft case. There are different configurations that we'll show you at the end. But this is the material set that you get. So that soft case contains 1 or 2 databots. We sell them as twin packs. The other materials that you see on there, that's the external temperature probe in the middle. So it's waterproof. You can drop it into a beaker or a stream. There's a Velcro plate that slides on the bottom. That's what you can use for sticking it on a drone or a kite or just about anything. The SD card that you see on the right, there's a micro SD card that's 8 gigabytes, and it fits into the SD card writer that's inside databot. So for offline missions, you can use that to store gobs of data. We have people send it up in weather balloons, for example, and collect data and then bring it back. You use the little SD card reader that you see right beneath that card. So you extract the card, pop it in the reader, and then it'll open right up in Excel or any other programs you might have that will read and interpret data for you. It comes in a CSV file format. There's the programming charge cable. It's got a built-in rechargeable LiPo battery, so you don't have to worry about buying batteries. It takes about 20 minutes to charge and lasts for a little over an hour. And then finally, there's a lanyard, and that's what the little red fabric item is there. And it hooks into the clip that you see coming off databot, so you can swing it like a pendulum, hang around your neck. You can also remove the lanyard if you're not going to be using it. And then on the far right there, that just gives you an idea of the scale. That's databot in a hand, and then it's connecting wirelessly to an Android tablet. And the software there that's being used for displaying is Google Science Journal, which is one of the softwares it connects to. So let's move on and take a look now at some of the examples of uses. And then we're going to actually take a look at phyphox, and you'll have an opportunity to play with the software that integrates with databot. So here's a few examples. We just released a series called the Carbon Dioxide Science Series, CO2 Science, which has 5 modules that are they're interdisciplinary. So they cover life science, they do some earth science, some environmental science, some chemistry, and the common thread through all of those curriculum modules is CO2. So for example, in the life science module, kids build a working model of a human lung, and we put databot inside so that they can see as the diaphragm moves, the air pressure inside the lung changes. Some other things that we do, the picture there is called the Cave of Dogs, which is an experiment in gas density. You actually fill a container with CO2, and databot gives you the CO2 readings. We'll actually look at that a little bit closer here in a little while. But anyway, that science series has been very popular. It's great for remote learning as well. We've had probably close to 100 students do remote classes with it now that receive databots at home and walk through the class with their online virtual instructor. They break, they go out and do experiments, they come back, they report, that sort of thing. And then here are a few other examples. You've got it being launched on an air rocket. The one next there is actually a design challenge we're going to look at where it's being used with a Sphero rover. And then the high altitude weather balloon launches I've already mentioned. And quickly, before we move on to the software, one other thing about just the configuration and design of databot is it was really created, as I mentioned, to be open architecture, and that's software, electronics, and physical connections. So the image there towards the bottom in the center actually shows you the I/O ports on the databot. So you've got I2C as one of the expansion ports. It's a common communication protocol. We provide you actually with the pinouts for the cables, so you can actually hack your own sensors and integrate it with databot. You can also take the I2C feed off of all of the different sensors that are on board and feed them into your own device. So for example, the Sphero rover has an I2C port that you'd be able to take data from and create autonomous behaviors based on sensor data that you're picking up. You can also integrate it with VEX, same approach, I2C. You'll notice upper left-hand corner displays the hooks for Lego, Fisher Technic, that Velcro plate that slides on that I mentioned. So designed with all kinds of fun physical hooks, and allows you to integrate it with all kinds of stuff that you may actually have in your classroom or in your closet. And then last, I've already mentioned, it works with a lot of different software. So you've got integration physically, electronically, and then of course with the different software. And this is actually an Excel scoreboard that's displaying data that's coming in live from databot. This is a science journal snapshot. And the software that we ship by default with it is phyphox. Let's take a look at it now. And I love this software because we've used a lot of different data visualization and recording software, and actually tested databot and different applications in classrooms and worked with kids, and found that the fastest, easiest way to get this set up is using phyphox, because you can actually pre-configure experiments, and with the single touch of your finger on an icon, you can actually pre-configure the experiment that'll load up, and you're taking data readings immediately. So phyphox is from a technical university in Germany. It's free and open source, and it actually accesses the sensors inside your smartphone. So you can download it and play with it even without a databot. And there's lots of experiments that people are doing with it. There's an extensive community, educators all over the world. It's had over 1 million downloads. That was as of January, and continuing to grow. Also translated into lots of languages, so the UI and resources are pretty extensive. And then finally, it provides you the ability, if you've provisioned for it, to connect wirelessly to external sensors like databot, which is what we're going to take a look at today. So I'm going to walk through the process for installing and using phyphox, which I've literally timed it, and I've been able to install, connect it to databot, and start taking data readings within 60 seconds. So there's a challenge for you. All you have to do is go to the app or Play Store with your smartphone or your tablet and look up phyphox the way it's spelled there, download it, open it, and it's going to give you this menu, which these are all pre-configured experiments that will access your internal sensors on your phone. You tap the little play icon that shows up in the upper right-hand corner after you select your experiment, and it'll start reading data. So this is actually what the process looks like. Here's your menu of different experiments that have been provided by phyphox. And then let's say you tap on one of those, the gyroscope is the one that's being displayed here. So you'll see it displays your 3 axes of gyroscope data coming in. And there's also the ability to put in experimental resource data. So if I go into the upper 3 dot menu, I can actually pull up data and wiki and other resources, a video on how to use this experiment. So very simple. If you've gone through the install process by now, hopefully you've actually gotten to that point, and I'll show you a couple more things about it. So once you're inside phyphox, here are some other things. So you can easily export data. Let's say that you had taken a data reading of CO2 using databot. You can easily export it by just opening up this, again, 3 dot menu, export this data set, and it gives you all these different formats that you can save it in. Using my iPad, you can see it's got my AirDrop there, so I can drop it right on my hard drive. I can also email it to myself, text it to myself, text it to a friend. It's super easy. You literally can have your data recorded and exported and in display on your computer, literally again within under a minute or so. It pops right in there and opens right up. This is it being displayed in Numbers, which is the default spreadsheet for Mac. And this was one of the things that we just absolutely loved about phyphox, because we could customize it for databot. It has the built-in capacity for you to build your own custom experiments, as I was mentioning, and you can add those to the collection of experiments within your app simply by scanning a QR code. So again, your 3 dot menu, add experiment from QR code, and you'll see a QR code scanner come up. And so, for example, the activities that we author, our lesson plans, will have a QR code typically that will preload the sensors that you need for that particular experiment. This is the cave of dogs that I was mentioning. It's a density of gases experiment, which I'll give you a little more info on here shortly, because it's one of our design challenges. But very simple. Once you scan that, over here on the far right-hand side of your screen, you can see what the new collection looks like. So once it's scanned, it automatically brings in all of these different sensor configurations, and these are all written specifically to support the CO2 Science series. So again, one touch of your finger, and you've got the sensor preloaded for that particular activity, whatever it is. So super easy to use. People, when I demonstrate it, are amazed at how quickly they can be capturing data. Let's see, here's one more example of another tool that's built in. In addition to exporting it, taking into third-party analysis tools, you've got some really nice, just simple tools that are built in, like here's your linear fit. This was an example of taking CO2 readings and the consumption of CO2 in a photosynthesis experiment. Put databot inside a closed container with plant leaves, and then put a bright light on it and watched the CO2 consumption take place. Very simple again. And last thing, which I'll give you an actual demonstration of here, is the functionality, which is really easy for classroom or virtual presentation. Since it's, of course, connecting wirelessly to an app, to get it onto your display, I use a browser, which we're going to escape out of this, and I'll open up a separate window so you can actually see it. You go to, again, that three-dot menu, you say enable remote access, and it'll give you an IP address. Now you have to have your browser and your smart device on the same network for this to work. But very simple, it'll show up with an IP address once you share, and you type in that IP address, and let's see if I'm still connected here. I connected a little while ago. There we go. So it's reading my databot that's here in my office where I'm doing my webinar from. And you can see the CO2 levels are right around, between 400 and 500 parts per million. If I close that down again, it'll give me the numeric readout. And so, for example, I'm going to breathe on it so you can just see that it picks up elevated CO2 levels from human breath. So you can see that very simple to use. If I wanted to export this data, and just simply pause, again, go to my three-dot menu and hit export data, and I could save it to my hard drive. So really easy to share for virtual presentations. I've taught a lot of kids virtually this summer as well, and use this regularly in the experiments. We actually use the CO2 in the Cave of Dogs experiment and lower databot down into the Cave of Dogs, which is thick with dense CO2, dangerous environment for humans and dogs. All right, let me go back here and I'll reshare this and we'll continue on. Oops. There we go. So yeah, simple screen sharing, very easy to use again. And this is, if this is included in the PowerPoint that she'll mail out to you, but gives you an example. This is just a screen capture of a browser window, and you can see the IP address being displayed there. So now we're going to do a few examples of design challenges. We've got about 11 minutes left, so I'm going to walk through a couple of different examples of design challenges that you can do with databot, which should give you some fun ideas of how you could apply it in your classroom. So the first one is the Cave of Dogs, which I've mentioned a few times. Now, this is a really interesting story for kids. So the Cave of Dogs is a real place. It's a cave located in Italy. And that picture there on the right is actually a picture of the opening to the cave today. Now, over 300 years ago, it was on the Grand Tour in Europe. So it was actually a kind of a macabre tourist attraction where people would come. People would go in with animals, the animals would pass out, and then they would bring them back out and revive them. But the mystery was, why can a human go in there, walk around, explore, and be fine, but their pet, their dog that's walking in there with them, might pass out? And you pose this mystery to the kids, and of course you get all kinds of fun ideas. You know, people are larger, for example, so we're not as susceptible to whatever the gas is or something in there. I had one 8-year-old girl tell me that, oh, I think it's because the dogs have a much sharper hearing and there's some kind of terrible sound in there that they can hear that we can't. Anyway, so you go through, of course, the inquiry experience and see what kind of ideas they come up with. And then as we go through the curriculum module, which is online, you finally come through and you come to the conclusion that, okay, well, CO2, the density of gases is what's happening here. So your CO2 is much heavier than air. So it actually settles into the bottom of the cave. The cave has a volcanic fumarole that's feeding CO2 into it constantly. And there's enough ventilation that the cave doesn't fill up all the way to the top, but there's this level of extreme concentration that's about a meter or lower. So your dog, you can see there in the silhouette, is below that level and in the hazardous zone. The table on the left we use to explain, okay, kids, these are the kinds of effects that happen when you have too high of an exposure to CO2. CO2 itself is not harmful to you, but what's happening is it's displacing the oxygen so that you can't get the oxygen you need to oxygenate your cells and perform, properly, which is why you lose your concentration, you have increased heart rate, those kinds of things. So anyway, the story is quite fascinating, and there's some other great examples. Resources are included in this curriculum module of the effect of CO2 on people and things that have happened with it. So here's the design challenge. With that in mind, you've painted the picture of the cave and people exploring the cave and it being hazardous. So the design challenge is to construct a model of your own cave of dogs, which you can use different containers for. In the curriculum online, you'll actually see an example of one that I've used that is kind of a deep cereal container. And you basically pour the CO2 into it. And there's also instructions on how to make CO2, mixing up carbon dioxide from baking soda and vinegar. Anyway, you pour the CO2 in there and you're watching the high levels of CO2 on the databot. Your design challenge now is to create a ventilation system that's going to effectively mitigate those CO2 levels of your cave to make sure they're down at a safe level. So that's a really real world experience type design challenge that involves a lot of different things, of course, understanding density of gases, ventilation systems, of course, sensors, being able to interpret data. So that's a really fun but simple challenge. And again, there's videos of the Cave of Dogs online that you can take a look at to see how to do it. Here's one other one, and this is one that we actually did with the local Boys and Girls Club, which was a lot of fun. So volatile organic compounds is one of the sensors that's on board inside that air quality sensor. And of course, VOCs are emitted by a lot of different chemicals. The smell of gasoline, for example, that's a volatile organic compound. Cleaning solutions, volatile organic compounds. Things that typically will evaporate at room temperature, and they're going to be putting these particles into the air, which if you have long-term exposure to them, they can be quite unhealthy. So teaching kids about VOCs, you can see a screen capture there of the VOC level coming off of VFOX. So here's the design challenge for VOCs, and this is one we actually did with, we used the rover from Sphero, but you could actually build your delivery platform using Lego robots, Vex robots, anything that you can build a mobile delivery platform that's controllable, from a remote source. So your design prep, you have the students explore VOC levels in the classroom. You can put some different things out, like different cleaning chemicals, so that they can become familiar with what the levels look like. And then finally, once you've built your platform, the challenge is you build this course. You place open containers of liquid around the classroom. You show the kids where they're all located, and then you add a strong source of VOCs to one of those containers. You don't tell them, of course. You want them to work as a team to identify the source of dangerous chemicals. So the one I did, I put out a number of small jars and used xylene in one of them. So the water and the xylene looked exactly the same, but of course, when you get close to it with a databot, they get much different readings. So here's the actual activity. You break your teams up, two-person teams, and one of the students is a pilot, so they'll be driving the delivery platform, and the other is the data scientist who's going to be reading the data. And that's a snapshot of a couple of the girls at the Boys and Girls Club. The girl on the left is doing the data science, so she's using a Chromebook that's connected to the databot, and the other girl is piloting, trying to explore the different levels there. So you can see that the particular design challenge where they integrated it with Sphero, they came up with different ways to actually mount databot to optimize its sniffing capability. So you know where the air quality sensor is located once you go through the anatomy, and you want to try to get that position so that it will be able to identify the source easily. So then the last part, of course, is it's timed as well. So you plan your course for efficiency, and the kids map that out. And so your pilot has a mission to try to get to each location as quickly as possible, and your data science person is watching the levels. So whoever gets the dangerous source identified first, of course, comes in first. So those are two fun, very simple to execute design challenges using databot, but they bring in a lot of different types of activities. So one more highlight here before we go on to Q&A, and that's about data literacy. So as I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of research looking for programs that actually promote data literacy. And data literacy, the reason that I'm emphasizing it is I've come to the conclusion it's probably one of the most important literacies that we can be imparting to students these days. And it's just because there's so much data. Kids are not aware of the power of the data tools that are watching them these days. I mean, everything on the internet is logged depending on what browser you're using. So every click of your mouse, move of your mouse, search that you do, all of that information is gathered. And of course, it's a good foundation for data science, and all of the jobs that are coming up are going to require people to be data literate. And finally, one of the three cornerstones of the NGSS, of course, are the science and engineering practices. And the fourth practice is definitely analyzing, interpreting data. So anytime you're using databot, you're making kids more data literate, making them more comfortable with gathering, interpreting, storing, sharing data. So that's my pitch on data literacy. I highly recommend you try to configure it into your classroom as you can. And I'm writing a blog series on it that you can certainly follow along with. So anyway, that's the end of the session, and I'll turn it over to you, Christy, if there are any questions. We've only got a few minutes left.
Let me just take a look over here. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, so I just wanted to oh, here we go. How do we get the data literacy blog series?
Christy can forward you details on that with this presentation. The first posting, we're about to do another one this week. We're actually interviewing data scientists, people who are promoting data literacy. Tomorrow I'm talking to the CEO of WASED, Steve Wozniak's organization. And they're one of the few organizations I've found that actually has a data literacy curriculum track. So those are the kinds of things we'll be addressing in it.
Awesome. And it looks like everybody's really happy to hear about that. And again, we also do share some of the databot blogs on our social media, and I will include all that information in our follow-up email. So if anyone does have any questions, you can feel free to respond to that, or you can email me at info@studica.com. And just thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Robert.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Let me know if anybody has any further questions. I'm always around.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a great day.